So hi everybody and welcome to episode 65 of Level Up. 60 minutes, as you know, of live Q&A where your questions and votes drive the show. We're constantly improving these shows. And today we're going to be bringing in your chat comments directly into the production. So please do go ahead, introduce yourself in the social chat. If you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube, we're there on both channels. Shanice is active in both this afternoon for you. So please do mention your name and tell us where in the world you're joining from. So your city, not your, which room in your home or what floor of the office building that you're in, but which city are you in? Will be brilliant to hear all about that. So I'm joining from the Thames Valley here in the UK on quite a pleasant early summer's day. A little bit of rain, of course, but that nice kind of freshness, which is a typical kind of British summer's day. Anyway, in the chat, you will also find a link to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and of course to add your own. We live stream on Mondays at 8 and Fridays at 2 p.m, always UK time, to both YouTube and LinkedIn. Today, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and in particular, what to look for when trying to choose the very best training courses. Is it the content? Is it the provider? Is it the instructor or the trainer or the teacher? What's the theory and practice so that you can make the best purchasing decisions? Now, we've got a fantastic panel for you today, so let's jump in and meet them. Returning to the panel today is Melanie Oldham, OBE. She is, of course, the CEO over at Bob's Business and a driving force behind upskilling hundreds of organizations in cybersecurity. Welcome back, Melanie. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Nick. Great to see the rest of the panel. Really looking forward to this session today. Thank you.
Excellent. Also joining us today is Ramiah. Ramiah Marappan is an accomplished cyber consultant who works internationally across multiple industries. He also represents Singapore on the ISO IEC JTC 1 SC27 committee. So I hope I've done that justice, Ramiah, and thank you for doing the work on standards because it's such an important aspect of the profession. Welcome to Level Up, Ramiah. Great to see you again.
Okay, thank you, Nick, for having me on the panel. Thank you. I'm from Singapore. The weather is fine,
Okay, excellent. Thank you for giving us some of your evening as well. We appreciate it. James is next. James Moore. He's the CEO and the founder of CultureAI. His background is in professional hacking, ethical hacking, that kind of thing. And he's built a strong reputation in the market through doing that. James focuses on building positive behavioural change. I know that this is something which all the panel are really, really behind achieving in their clients as well. Building positive behavioural change in organisations to improve their cyber resilience. Welcome to Level Up, James. Great to have you.
Cheers, Nick. Thank you. Good to be here. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And completing the panel today is Zain Javed. He is the CTO and co-founder of Mitigate and in his own right, also an NCSC certified trainer with the UK National Cyber Security Centre. Working in the northwest of England, Zain focuses on building cyber capability across his client base. Welcome back, Zain.
Thanks, Nick. Looking forward to the session today. Hi, everyone.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Also joining us today is, of course, our question master, welcoming back Charlotte Miller from her location, also in the Thames Valley here in the UK. So welcome, Charlotte. Great to see you today.
Great to see everybody and looking forward to today's show.
All right, excellent. So let's jump straight in, panel. And Charlotte, may we have our first question, please?
Yes, the first question that we have is from Amar. How often should we be delivering cybersecurity training to employees?
It's a really good question, isn't it, about frequency? Because I think if you do it too often, then you're at risk of, kind of people getting a bit jaded with it. But if you don't do it often enough, you can't keep them up to date. Zain, start us off on this one, then we'll hear from Melanie.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because a lot of the times organizations think that should be kind of an annual thing, but you've got to have it bite-sized chunks throughout the year. So as long as you get regular kind of notifications on the various aspects of cybersecurity, then it keeps on the forefront of everyone's mind so they don't miss a thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Melanie?
Yes, a lot of cybersecurity mistakes, breaches happen because of the bad habits we have. And in order to change a habit, you have to do it frequently and often and repeat things. And it's argued that we actually forget about 75% of the information that we are taught and that's new, if not applied within about 6 days. So it's really important, as was just mentioned, about having micro learning, so little and often, as is definitely the way forward. Because on average, micro learning is about 10 minutes, and it's effective that changes the completion rates of it as well by about 83%. So it's about trying to get that information bite-sized, repeat it often to influence and change those bad habits that we've got and create and form new, more secure habits.
Excellent. I'm certainly a creature of habit, and I totally relate to what you've both been saying there. James, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, same. I think my background as a pen tester, I've never seen annual security awareness training actually stop us getting into an organisation. We generally recommend little and often bite-sized, really short modules. And the other thing that I just point out is that you probably shouldn't train every employee the same frequency. If you've got employees that are actually very good at, say, for example, spotting phishing emails, there's no point training them repeatedly all the way through the year 200 times. It doesn't make any sense. You're going to overtrain them. So look at individuals as well and try and work out who you need to support and how often to support them. But as a general rule, yeah, more frequently is generally better, and we see better results.
Excellent. I completely agree with that. I think that this is one of the reasons why we do Level Up twice a week. Little and often is a great way for us all to be able to pick up information. And Ramiah, final thoughts on this before we move on.
Okay. The question says, how often should we be delivering cybersecurity training to employees? Adding on to Melanie, I think very important about culture. Culture, that means training often is good, but the more is the organization culture. Top down is very important. That means the senior management also should be involved in the participating in the training and walking the talk. Thank you.
Yeah, that's certainly very, very true indeed. No matter what the size of the business is, we're all in this together. And cyber resilience is most definitely like that. Okay, we are all a link in the chain or in the chain fencing or whatever way you want to visualize all of this. So great start. Thank you very much indeed. And what a lovely question to get us going. So thank you, Omar, for submitting that. Now, of course, if you're watching online, and I can see many of you are, then feel free just to type into the chat a question that you have, and we'll bring it into the view for the panel to be able to answer for you in real time. Okay, so please do that. It's great to see so many of you, and welcome to you from all over the world. Charlotte, let's move on, please. We'll take our next question if we may.
Of course, Nick. The next question is from Wendy. Are we better off designing our own training program to target issues areas for the company, or sourcing external cybersecurity training, which may be broader?
Okay, Melanie, and then James.
Yeah, so 18 years in this, and one of the things is, yeah, absolutely, you can embed it, and it's really good if you can customize and tailor the content around what your organization needs. But it's actually really, really quite resource intensive. As I say, 15 years of doing this, and we're still creating new pieces of content, new pieces of communication tools. So the benefit you get with an existing provider is really about the wealth and the depth of it. So when we're talking about how do you change behavior, it's about that reinforcement piece. So it's really good to have really good sort of online learning, but supporting that by communication tools, by testing tools, and that comes with the bonuses of working with different providers that can have all that content. The other thing to bear in mind is the fact that content can really needs to be to a degree tailored to that organization. So picking one that potentially can be customized and tailored around your needs, and bearing in mind that organizations, 15 years in the industry, you have that element of having lots of content, and people tend to think, if I buy one thing, I've got to stick with it. It's about asking, what other solutions or what other flavors do you have out there? Because variety is a really good way of spicing things up and changing it. But yes, you absolutely can. And if the more you can develop communications internally and the structure to support those, that will support that cultural development we spoke about. So it's about really, really sort of getting people to own it, because if you can get people to own it, it'll be more effective. So thinking about the teams that you have within the organization, what roles they might play to support any program that you have. So your marketing team, they're effective communicators. They're really good at getting messaging across, making sure things are really simplified and removing jargon rather than using the tech teams to do it. Make sure you're using HR to provide that support role around it. So thinking about how different teams play a really important part in the whole of the communication mix. So yes, you can, and there's lots and lots of free resources out there. It just can be a little bit more time consuming than you initially potentially anticipate it to be.
Thanks very much indeed. James and then Zain.
Yeah, Melanie's point on resources are a huge one, right? It takes a lot of time and a lot of resource to do tailored security awareness training and produce that content. And to be honest, most organisations that try to do it badly because there's a level of expertise there that's involved as well. What I would say is, and where we see the future of this going, and there's more and more vendors out there that are starting to look at using data to drive individualised training. So I would, when you're looking at security awareness vendors, I would be looking at those vendors that can collect data and turn that data into automated ways to deploy tailored training that's based on the different areas of the business. If you've got employee A and they're setting weak passwords, but they're not clicking on phishing, and you've got employee B that's clicking on phishing, but not setting weak passwords, and that does happen, you want different training to go to those individual users. And there are platforms out there now that will automate that and take all of that burden away. But I also think there is an element of, certainly for larger organizations, involve your internal comms, internal marketing teams in determining the kind of the messaging that goes into that content. But yeah, I think by and large, you should probably look into outsourcing almost all cases.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, James. Zain and then Ramiah.
Yeah, I think agreeing with those points, but also just adding to that is internally it needs to work for you. So absolutely everyone within the organization or the people who kind of manage this area need to know the areas where the risks are. So once you know where the risks are, you can then look at external providers and see what capabilities they have. So this is where it's really important where you pick the right supplier. So that organization who's providing training, because there's obviously a lot of the external providers are out there, which one matches closely to what you're trying to achieve. And that could be in ways of accreditation, quality, type of training provided. So all of the things I think need to be looked at before making the final decision of which provider that you should be using and whether it fits your kind of key objectives. And I think also just adding on to that point about designing your own courses, I think it's really important that you leave the experts to do what they're good at rather than creating content that may not be up to scratch. And if it's ticking a box, then it's quite easy to do. But if you want a really good training program which changes the culture for the better, then it's better to bring in the experts to deliver that.
Thank you very much. Some really sound counsel so far. So quite a hot topic, this one, really. So Ramiah, and then we're going to come back to Melanie for a couple more thoughts. So go ahead, Ramiah.
Thanks, Nick. Adding on to Melanie, James, and Jane, first, each organization has to know their needs, basically either to research. Based on the needs, based on the region in ASEAN region, normally we are talking about across the company training to all people. We need to customize to that organization, So that means you, like say you are a bank, financial institution, the type of social engineering that happens will be different. So from that point of view, that type of training should be have own training program customized for the banking industry or the aviation industry. And talking about external cyber security training, by and large, that will be more technical type training, like ethical hacking, on the detailed technical type. Then I can go to APMG, this type organization. So it's a mixture based on the.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Ramiah. Yeah, it's really insightful, isn't it? And it's knowing about your own business culture, your own talent, your own team, and how best to dovetail into those professional organisations whose 100% of their attention is in this area. Melanie, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, just the only other thing I wanted to add to that is talk to the providers about what sort of clients do they service. Can they give you case studies? Because the best way to learn is to learn from your peers and try and have an introduction as to what's worked for you, how's it worked, how have you implemented it, how local authorities operate is very different, how to an SME or a tech or a financial company might work. And there's, as I say, there's lots and lots of content out there. And what you don't want to be doing is information overload and turning people off. You want to go in there with the elements that you know are going to work and then build up on that rather than sort of going in all guns blazing and then realizing that that's sort of not effective and not working.
Very much indeed. The one thing that I would add to all of this is to also consider here, where your expertise really lie. Far too much in our past, we've witnessed earlier in our careers, I'm quite sure, a situation where we've almost been sent like sheep into a dip. It's your turn now to be immersed in this particular piece of training and so on. And after a while, it's not a refreshing experience. It's just stressful. So it's a really good advice from the panel here. Try and work with, a supplier or some small suppliers who get to know you. You get to know them. You can add that domain experience. You can add that individual cultural experience of your organization, and they will bring you the very best in teaching and learning. And they will bring you the very best in the emerging threats and how other people are countering. That's their job to do. So it's a really harmonious relationship when you can form those longer term relationships, because I kind of think this is a process. There's no end point here where you can say, we've done cyber now, we're fine. Very good. Charlotte, let's move on, please, if we may, and take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Brendan. Are there any accreditations you recommend I look for when sourcing cybersecurity training?
James, start us off, please.
Sure. So obviously NCSC certified training, generally pretty good. I imagine most people on this panel are involved in some way, shape or form with providers that are NCSC certified, so that's always a good start. To the less common ones that are worth considering, and a lot of organizations don't think about this, training providers will handle a lot of your data. They'll handle a lot of employee information, they'll handle completion rates, they'll know where staff strengths and weaknesses are. So also query them about accreditations on security. Do they have things like Cyber Essentials Plus? Do they have things like ISO 27001? I think whilst a training provider on the face of it seems reasonably harmless, and we're always here to improve security, we handle a lot of data and we've got to protect it. So always ask the vendors what security certifications they have, as well as the general certifications around how good they are at what they say they do.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, James. You're absolutely right. And so just for those of you who aren't familiar, in the UK, we abbreviate our own National Cyber Security Centre to NCSC. And there's a whole variety of acronyms available to use in this space. So the first thing to do is to kind of look to whoever is the government agency in your own country and research there. Sometimes it's part of government, sometimes it's part of policing. It will vary from territory to territory. The international standards that are out there are very well known, I think, and well understood. And most providers should have a handle on, what is current guidance for you in your particular part of the world, because it does tend to vary a little bit. A large proportion of it is the same worldwide, but there are some local variations as well. All right, very good. Thank you very much indeed, James. Great answer, very comprehensive answer to that question. Charlotte, let's take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Stephen. Cybersecurity training is often repetitive and ignored by staff. How can we help staff engage with the training so that they implement what they learn?
This is a kind of a magic question, really, isn't it? Okay. Zain, why don't you start us this time, then we'll hear from Melanie.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's quite important to have some sort of scenario-based training and learning. So you actually giving examples of where you would actually use those awareness skills and implement mixture of videos, but at the same time, any kind of interactive quizzes or things like that, which engages the user. I think that's quite important. There's quite a few different suppliers now that are adding in gamification elements. Again, that's a really good way to get people engaged in that. And I think we've all been there where at a certain point, training becomes almost laborious. You don't really want to do it, but you have to do it for compliance reasons. So adding in that interactivity is vital to any kind of training program. But mix it up with not just e-learning based training or just face-to-face training. Having a mixture of both can also add that bit of extra kind of interactivity throughout your schedule.
Excellent, thank you, Melanie, and then James.
Yeah, so we touched on micro-learning as well, and the bonuses of micro-learning, just short snippets and reinforcements and reminders, which obviously keep things a lot fresher, but also think about sort of incentives and rewards as well, because reward programs that address performance and motivation of getting people to do it increases performance by about 25 to 44%. So think about how can you recognise and reward people for doing it, but that still doesn't mean if the training and the content is boring that they're not going to engage. So make sure the content is relevant and relatable to the audience, because you don't want to be going with very, very basic, in our case, inanimated learning, to very, very technical individuals. What you want to be doing is making sure the people who don't understand cyber, who aren't aware of cyber, are engaged. They like storytelling, they like animation, they like things that are going to attract their attention and take them away from something that's potentially quite laborious from the day-to-day job. So it's kind of thinking about things from a marketing principle. So from an advertisement point of view, what sort of things would attract you to do it in the first instance? But think very much about your users and how do they take in information, treat different people in different ways, which is why the whole reinforcement pack, the whole communications pack, that some of it you might put very, very plain text blogs out. Other things you might consider doing is vlogs, or getting people to record things. One of the things that we've tried with our clients is actually getting new members of staff to create a vlog, a video messaging when they start within an organisation, explaining what a particular policy is about, because hearing in somebody else's words in their language is a different way of communicating that message. So just think about how you can refresh it up and how you can use your teams to support and enhance any sort of learning, but don't do information overload. Make sure that you're targeting the risks that you need to, the people that you need to, in the way that you need to, without sort of doing a blanket approach.
Okay, some really great ideas there for us to work with, aren't they? James, what else can you add to that?
Yeah, I think Melanie's comment then about the blanket approach and avoiding the blanket approach is absolutely key. And that's the number one way to just switch everybody off from any kind of training. One approach that we're finding works really well is, instead of necessarily thinking about training, thinking about coaching. Like, you're trying to coach employees. You don't just want to train them. You want to coach them based on what they're struggling with, when they're struggling with it, and then they are much more likely to act on that advice. So look at ways, and a lot of vendors will have functionality around this now, where you can look at what a user is doing. Are they creating a risk? And then provide them with a snippet of support or coaching when they create that risk. And yes, that falls under the training banner, but it's much more coaching, it's much more supportive, and people are much more likely to respond to it. If you post personally identifiable info in Slack, for example, or an instant messenger of any type, and you get an immediate, just very short snippet of support saying, look, this is why that was risky, here's a better way of handling that data, that's really effective, and people will pay much more attention to it than maybe a once-a-year module that says, here's how to use instant messaging securely, that nobody's going to read. So think of it as coaching is a really good aspect.
Thank you very much, Ramiah.
Okay, I'd like to add on basically now we are talking about DevOps, we're talking about collaboration, we are talking about culture. So for security in the past, it's always been like people try to keep away from security guys. So the important thing is how can these people connect together. So one way is actually when people are doing well in the phishing campaigns, right? You look at how can you reward them. In this part of the world, what people do is that they conduct these phishing drills, then they take note. Say 100 employees, and they say, 80 people managed to say that this is a phishing mail. But the poor 20 did, or they click as normal mail. Then they keep a record. Then 6 months, when the manager reviews HR, then the manager says, sorry, I'm not going to give you a bonus. But the important here is actually you want to security enable, built-in, breathe-in. You need to look at how to reward those 80 people who have done well. Then you can also, among them, you can make them security ambassadors. They become instead of security a guy is telling each department you have a security champion, and they can be the driving force among the staff. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, panel. And I'm going to put this question to the audience. I'm going to be cheeky today, all right? I'm going to get you guys who are watching us online to actually think. So if I can, I want to ask you, what do you really love, okay, when it comes to this kind of training? What's your preference, in other words? And also, what do you really hate? Okay, so, just tell us, all right, politely, but tell us in the chat, what do you really love about this kind of training? How does it make you feel when you get it right? All of that kind of stuff. Some of the things that the panel have been talking about, but also what really kind of switches you off. Okay, so that would be super good for our audience online to be able to answer for us. This is a first, isn't it? The panel asking the audience a question. So go ahead, type your thoughts into the chat. What do you love? All right, about switched on cybersecurity training really works for you, whether it's recognition, reward, engagement, excitement, gamification, whatever it is, and what really kind of turns you off it. All right, we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. So Melanie, will link in your other thoughts when we come back to that topic in a few minutes' time. Very good. Charlotte, in the meantime, let's go ahead and take our next question if we can, and then we'll hear from the audience soon.
Thanks, Nick. The next question is from Lou. Are there any subjects that must be covered in any cybersecurity training?
Hey, Melanie, start us off, please.
Yes, I'll do two, and then the guys can obviously kick in. So to me, it's multi-factor authentication, because we know that the biggest challenge and the weakness is around passwords, and most password breaches where people reuse passwords, where they use the same login credentials, where they share them freely, most of that is combated by multi-factor or two-factor authentication, which is you need another step to go through before accessing a system. By implementing two-factor authentication, what you're also doing is you're getting people to think with security first with every action that they're doing, and studies show that if you start to do something that's a behavioural change behaviour that you're replicating on a regular basis, other elements of information security come out of that. Also thinking about adopting, a clear desk within the offices was always easier, but we have a very, very different approach to that. But we shouldn't do. We should still think about, what's being displayed on our screen and who can see what, thinking about, overarching eyes. So I'll start with those two, and then obviously the others guys can pick up.
Thank you very much indeed. James?
Yeah, I mean, Melanie absolutely stole my first choice there, Melanie. MFA all the way, super important. To add to that, phishing, obviously, because that's the biggest risk for most organisations at the moment. It's been the biggest risk for however long I can remember computers being around, so quite a while. But it's still important we educate people around phishing. And then the third point is more around just make sure you understand what your risks are across the organisation. Too frequently, we see organisations just deploy blanket security awareness training everywhere, covering every topic, every module you can think of. And it's much more important to work out what are the actual risks that people are creating in the organisation. And they are the subjects that absolutely have to be covered by your programme in some way, shape or form. It's really, really important to understand that. And there's plenty of platforms out there now that will give you that insight and then let you work out what the best modules are and let you deploy those modules. So that's the kind of thing to think about.
Thank you very much. Zain?
Those are all really good subjects, but also remote security, I think, is equally important. So if you're working from public places, working from home, connecting to unsecure networks, then you've got to make sure that your staff or your workforce understand the risks of doing so. But I think one thing to kind of add on to the subject matter is in terms of your organization, if you're following 27001 or if you're following any kind of specific framework, you have policies and procedures in place, then I think it's quite vital that you have training that supports those processes, because there's no point introducing training subjects that don't go hand in hand with the policies and procedures that you have, and vice versa. So I think having them aligned will definitely benefit, because then your team members, your colleagues will know exactly what to do in a certain situation, and then also they have a policy to go with it as well.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, so I think with this, there are the must-haves, all of the time, and the style in which we do it is so important to the outcome. So we're going to feature some of the answers to the question, that we put. We put the question to the viewers, around what do you love about cybersecurity training, and also kind of what disenfranchises you somewhat in the approach being taken. So we've got here a comment, providing it in a reasonable and manageable quantity. So that's interesting. That's back to the bite-sized learning or the micro learning, and this kind of thing is important so that we don't get bored with the content. It can be dull. All right. I assure you, everybody on the panel delivers really exciting and interesting training. And if you're being bored, I would suggest connect with these guys on LinkedIn so that they can just show you what that bright sunrise, really truly looks like. If your life is full of a little grey cloud when it comes to cybersecurity education and training, these are the rainbow equivalents, all right, the folks who are on the panel. So they really are setting the pace and showing the way. Using real life examples. Melanie, how important are real life examples to the content, to getting that, engagement and retention?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're replicating things, people, the retention of information is far higher if people can actually relate to what's happening to them. So thinking about how you're applying things to the working setting that they're in, are they now home based? Do they, have different influences that they have at home than they previously had in the office? Going back to that point of it, you traveling, making sure that you're tailoring it around the circumstances people are in. But if people are disengaged, if they can't relate to the subject matter, or they don't think it's going to happen to them, it's really, really important. But it's really important, going back to the previous point about it being positive communications, because we have this ability in our human nature to want to kind of, we go with our emotions rather than our logical brain as a thing. So anything that excites us, that interests us, if we feel that we're an element of fear, we tend to switch off. So when we're talking about phishing campaigns, naming and shaming is never a great way. What's a really great way is telling people what you're doing, why you're doing it, and just to be a little bit more vigilant and going back with that positive communication and turning around and saying, thank you so much for letting us know that something didn't feel right, for reporting something, and just reinforcing that. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, and we've got another positive one here as well, actually. I love that it's more of a Q&A session, question and answer style session that helps to clear our doubts related to any specific topic. James, how do you manage that realistically to drive it more as Q&A rather than kind of broadcast information?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. There's kind of a high tech and a low tech way. So if we start with the kind of the lower tech way, it's looking at what people are struggling with, running things like even group workshops. If you've got the ability, we've all got things like Zoom and Teams now. We've got the ability to get many people, or just a small number of people in a room. We can know in advance before we get into a room what people are likely to be struggling with and prepare some content to get people talking. But then just ask people random questions around it and get them to ask their own questions as part of those sessions. And that's super engaging, because you start the conversation and you let people then ask the questions that bother them, and you won't be able to predict the questions that they ask. I've done loads of those sessions, and some of the questions I would never have guessed I'd be asked in a million years. So that's super important. If you're trying to do it at scale, you can ask questions automatically with software and platforms now, and automatically give people answers so that they can use things like chatbots and things to get those questions answered, but in a human-like way. And that's super useful to do it at scale.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you to our audience as well. We threw you a bit of a curveball there to kind of ask you a question instead of you asking us. So it's really good to get that engagement. Thank you very much indeed. And I can see that we're starting to get some live questions coming in from our audience as well. So Charlotte, if we may, can we take our next question, please?
You can, Nick. We've got a question from Katie P. How can we change the security behaviour of our employees, not just raise awareness?
Okay, so Zain, start us off on this, and then we'll hear from Melanie.
I think what we found, so our personal kind of experience in this is looking at the risk perspective. So if you make everyone aware that by doing certain actions, it adds to the personal risk as well as the organization risk. And being able to highlight that, they can then look to ensure that they are doing things in the correct manner to reduce the overall risk of the organization and to obviously mitigate that risk. So I think that's one of the things that I would definitely highlight, is making people aware of that will automatically highlight the key areas that they should be focusing on. I'll let the guys and to talk about the next topics.
Thank you very much, Melanie.
So making people accountable as well, and getting them to understand the impact of their behaviours and talking about them. What we're saying is the difference between awareness and heightening somebody's sense to being able to actually apply something. And that's why when we have applications and gamification learning, where you can actually try to relive a real experience, which is the point we touched on earlier, repeating information in a more interested way and reinforcing it allows them to sort of try practical risk decision making, as opposed to it actually happening at the point at which it's happening. So, delivering simulated phishing exercises by putting people in cybersecurity escape rooms, they get to test it and look at how would they fix that problem, how would they resolve that problem, and reenact it, so that it's, it then becomes relived, it becomes lived behavior, which we're asking them in the event of a breach to actually relive that already experienced behavior. So by doing these challenges, by doing the gamified element, by doing elements of practical assessment in a safe sandbox environment, allows them that when something bad actually happens, they've already just trying to pull on memory and re-initiating that behavior, which is already taught behavior from a previous exercise.
Thank you very much, James.
We have this concept called perceived vulnerability. So if an employee doesn't think that they're vulnerable to making a certain type of mistake or create a certain type of risk, they typically won't absorb the training around it because they don't think it's relevant. And if you give people training as they make a mistake, that's much more likely to resonate with them and get that behavior change, because they all of a sudden know, actually, yeah, sure, I made a mistake, but this is relevant to me. It only has to be short training to do that. So that's kind of number one. And then number two is the reward side. Just rewarding people with very, very small prizes for doing good things. If you see somebody do something good, whether it's reporting a phishing email, they've maybe changed their password and they set it stronger this time. There's loads of things you can measure and reward. That's super, super powerful. And it doesn't have to be big rewards. I saw a client recently give away a real life Tesla, an actual moving Tesla. And that was less effective than giving a few people some chocolate bars for doing something great. So it doesn't have to be expensive. Just think about rewards. It's super, super powerful.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I know it's kind of like, honestly, it's not the value, it's the thought that counts often in these situations. And a thank you, a well done. One of the things that is super useful, I think, in the electronic era is to use little apps like, I think there's a praise app. There is in Microsoft Teams. There's a little app called Praise, and you can just recognize people for their contribution and doing something, to your point, James, to in the right way, or achieving something that they've struggled with previously. So very well done. Yeah, excellent. Ramiah, final thoughts on this, please, before we move on.
Yes. Okay. Very important for change of security among employees. The senior management should also participate. They join like say you have a group of staff attending the training. They should join this discussion, and walk the talk. So that will help. And the second one is that whenever there's any discussion related to security, like say they are doing they do a risk assessment. The senior management say, hey, this is something we need to take action, instead of saying, oh, why are you raising this security problem, if this is only a risk, right, it's potential, why are you bringing it up? So the culture is you can be a positive culture or the other side, So this is where the senior management play an important role.
I totally agree with that. You can get a sense of the level of maturity in an organization by its approach to people raising concerns. And if people's concerns, like, well, why are you asking this? Then it's fairly immature view, I would say. Much, much better for us all to be able to say, I'm a bit worried about this or that or whatever. And then the culture is, well, that's a good point. Let's look at that. Let's just quantify it. Let's see how likely that might be, or how even if it's not very likely, it may be hugely impactful. So much of our lives now are driven by dashboards, which tell us that 99 point something percent of the time we're doing okay. Well, that's not what happens when it all goes horribly wrong. So even if it's infrequent, it can be hugely impactful, is my suggestion. So listening to people's concerns, super important. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Let's go on and take the next question, please, Charlotte.
Thanks, Nick. I'm pleased to say that we've got a live question from Louis. How do we take the boost in cybersecurity that training brings and turn it into lasting behavioural change?
Yeah, it's like a New Year's resolution, isn't it? We kind of, finish Christmas, we look forward into the new year, we start celebrating the Lunar New Year and all of that kind of thing. Definitely this year, we're all going to be new super people and not the old person that we're leaving behind. Melanie, how do we make that transition in ourselves from wanting to do it to actually living it in real life?
Yeah, and it comes back down to that reinforcement piece and making sure that it becomes an agenda item of every meeting that you're touching on it. You're making sure that you've got that as part of your reward and recognition for your senior management teams. What KPIs are they being measured on? How are you making sure that it's, going back to that top-down approach, is how are you making sure that it's been implemented? Do you have metrics? One of the things that we go through is a human vulnerability assessment, and we do that at the start of a campaign. We repeat it at the end and repeat it every 12 months and make sure you've got a means of by which you're benchmarking yourselves and seeing, okay, how, is this working? And if it's not working, change what you're doing. Think about how else you approach it, but very much about making sure that you're repeating things and using that peer-to-peer influencing in terms of your communication. So make sure, one approach is to focus on a particular topic area once a month. And, every year, just keep repeating that element and going through and making sure you're addressing that topic. So unfortunately, it's a case of repetition and monitoring and measuring the success of what you've done previously.
Thank you very much indeed. Zain?
Yeah, great question, actually. One thing I was thinking is, obviously we mentioned phishing, where you do a phishing assessment, a simulation, and see how the individuals or the organization is responding to that. And then you can do some training and then do some phishing again and see what the difference is. But also, I think doing some kind of red team engagements, meaning social engineering exercises, where it incorporates the physical element and maybe the verbal element, and testing the staff, testing the workforce and how they respond to those areas as well. And sometimes presenting that back can give it that shock factor to actually make that change, that everlasting impression that they have to keep security at the forefront at all times. And I think that could then complement quite nicely to the ongoing training that Melanie and James and Ramiah just talked about.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And thank you so much, Louis, for phrasing yet another really great question. I just want to give a shout out actually to Louis, because he joins most of our weekly Level Up sessions and always makes a great contribution. So thank you so much, Louis. It's really good to have you, and it would be really nice actually to welcome you to the panel as well, so that you're in front of the camera at some point in the future. You don't have to be earning a living doing this. You can be a user in an organization. You can be somebody that's learning the topic and so on. We welcome everybody onto the panel of Level Up. What's what makes it a unique set of people to be able to discuss real life topics with. The other thing that I would say, about this kind of change is that we are creatures of habit, and to change habits needs a certain fortitude. It is often easier to do that if others around you support you on your journey. So be transparent, share that this is what we're going to do. Our organization uses electronic communication all the time. So we are distributed around the world. My early started my day is with our colleagues in Australia and China, and then the folks in India and the people who are in Africa and Europe. And then towards the end of the day, I'm talking more with the Europeans and those folks in the Americas, right? So we use it all of the time. And you've given me some really good ideas about trying to embed a few little quizzes and thoughts and challenges into our regular Teams meetings or Zoom sessions and so on, when we're going on to talk about another topic, we might slip in some thoughts on cybersecurity as part of that mix of the meeting. So thank you very much indeed. What great ideas. Thank you, Louis. Look forward to hearing some more from you as well very soon, and welcoming to you to the panel. Right, well, let's press on, if we may. And Charlotte, let's take our next question.
I can confirm that Louis has scheduled in an episode to appear on Level Up. So, yeah,
Has he?
great.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
Well, that's really
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you, Louis.
Yeah,
Thank you for volunteering. That's grand. Yeah.
The next question is from Katie in Manchester. Who decides what good cybersecurity is?
Aha, okay. Who says good is good? James.
Yeah, I wasn't putting my hand up to say it's me that decides what's good. I was just saying I've got an answer for it. So I think it's the individuals. I think it's the employees ultimately that decide what good cybersecurity training is. Right. I think if you've not got good training, people aren't going to pay attention to it, and ultimately, you as an organisation are going to have to get rid of that training and bring in something else. So ultimately, it's the people that are consuming the training that decides if it's good. Second to that, it's probably senior management who are going to be looking at the outcomes of the training. They also will have a view on whether it's good, because it's possible for training to be well adopted by employees and really enjoyed by employees, but still not drive the business outcomes that the organisation want. But I would largely say employees are the guys that are going to decide whether or not it's good or not.
Melanie?
I'm going to challenge James slightly as to whether or not senior management are the right people to evaluate it. I think they're the right people to evaluate the tools, the reports, and the metrics. Are they the right people to evaluate it? In the same respect, you don't get a cybersecurity team to evaluate a cybersecurity awareness product, because for them, it will always be too simple. It won't be the right approach. You know, as say, many years in this industry, and I chose a company name called Bob's Business, and initially laughed at by any IT or security people, but actually from end user point of view, really, really memorable, really, really engaging. Again, likewise, cartoons don't necessarily resonate with the IT because it seems a little bit slow to get to the point. However, the scenarios, the relationships, the end users can absolutely 100% relate to. So I definitely agree with James's comment. It's the people using it are the ones that need to test it. So when embarking on a training program, think about doing a pilot, think about doing a test bed, and make sure that test bed and the people really interacting with it, engaging with it, are the end users, not necessarily the senior management team or the IT team, but make sure they get the right metrics. So what does that system report on? What is it pushing out? You know, how do they measure the success of that? And what does success look like? Definitely important, but in terms of should they evaluate it, you know, again, just be mindful that their feedback may not be, thinking of the majority of the education, and also thinking that there's two very, very different, there's many different groups of people. An office-based person is very different to a retail-based person who isn't in front of a screen all the time. So again, if you're thinking about an organization, you can have multiple different facets and different types of individuals, and maybe doing test beds of different types of content delivery in each of those would be more effective.
Okay, thank you very much. Zain?
I think also just to add to that, it's really important that you know which body is accrediting it as well. So if you're looking at CPD or NCSC, so National Cybersecurity Centre credit training, there's some good quality in there. So if the question is asking, if the quality of the product is good, definitely having someone like that to verify and give it that kind of stamp of approval is definitely what you should be looking for. In terms of the content, then absolutely agreeing with both of my colleagues there.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, panel. The other thought that I have here is it's kind of on three levels there. So we've talked a lot about the consumers of the education and training, super important, and also how having a structured approach to be able to evaluate the effectiveness is really critical. From a starting point, then you need to work with a reputable supplier, all right? Everybody is borrowing the authority here from somebody else. The way in which we mitigate risk is by forming an alliance around the world against cyber criminals, against behavior which is unwelcome and unwarranted. And by doing that, we all are net better off. So the way to do that is to access the standards. The standards are, on occasions, impenetrable, I would suggest, and much easier to interpret if you have some experts to be able to help you along the way. such as the folks on the panel. So do tap into their expertise, reach out on LinkedIn and connect with them. Last question now, please, Charlotte, if we may. And panel will need to be super brief if we're going to fit this one in.
I'm not sure that they will be able to be super brief, Nick. Question from Kazim. How do we check that the training we purchase is legitimate?
Okay, as far as we're able to do, how can you tell it's legitimate? Melanie, briefly, and then James, please.
So go for users who've used it. Check out Trustpilot. Who's actually said that they've used it, they've implemented it, and it's got a good review. Again, going back to the certifications, but the certifications from NCSC, CISEC, CREST, all certified training providers. But what is it covering? Is it covering one module, or is it covering the whole suite of modules? It's a bit like 27001. Is it covering just one department, or is it covering the whole organisation?
James?
Yeah, accreditation is a big one. Reviews is a big one. Try the training. If a vendor won't let you try the training before you buy it, just ignore them. Every decent vendor out there wants you to see their training. We will, if you message me on LinkedIn, I will happily run you through our training. Right, that's the whole point. We're proud of it. So that's the big one for me. I think if a vendor's proud of the training, that's a good telltale sign.
Thanks so much, Zain. Final thoughts.
What they said.
Okay, thanks very much. So we're going to move to closing remarks now, panel. Thank you very much indeed, Zain. We asked you to be brief, and you absolutely were. It's just to keep us on time for everything. So we're going to walk around the panel and just get some reflections on today's session. It's been fast and furious. The time has slid by in front of us very, very quickly. Ramiah, can you start us off, please? And then we'll hear from Melanie.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Today, there was a lot of good questions asked. In summary, the takeaway is actually, if you want to have your staff in your organization to have security hygiene, there are three stakeholders, staff who are attending the training, they need to be committed to learn. Then the top management have to have a reward structure and walk the talk, And then the training provider also must deliver their quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Melanie, and then James.
Yes, challenge your point, Nick, that make sure that it's good. Something is better than nothing. And the reality is that actually, in terms of organisations that have taken formal training in the last 12 months, as a general, small business is only 18%, charities 19%, public sector 21%. So we've got a long way to go where we're not actually delivering. So my first point is start it and do it in the first instance. In terms of what I would say then to look out for is make sure it's employee focused, make sure that you've got variety, that it's engaging, that you reinforce regularly, use micro-learning because it's how we all learn now. Make sure that the messaging is really positive and that you make sure that it's jargon-free. They would be my key focuses to look at.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. James and then Zain.
For me, start with behaviours, measuring as many different behaviours as you can, as automatically as you can. Plenty of platforms that will help you do that now. And then use that to drive training. Automation is your friend. There are very, very powerful platforms out there to use automation to deliver tailored training that's going to target your exact weaknesses to the right employees with the right messaging. So yeah, use automation.
Absolutely right. Thank you very much. Zain and then Charlotte.
Yeah, having a good top-down approach, making sure you get the buy-in from management. They're setting the tone, so make sure that they're on board and they're doing the training as well. And everyone's on the same page, whether that's your organization staff or your suppliers and so on. And equally, I think it's also really vital as well that your staff members understand the training and the risk level that they pose. So I think all of the things that we talked about was great. I really enjoyed the session today. I wish I brushed up on my stats a bit more. But as always, it was a great session.
That's all right. Okay. We have a broad range of folks on the panel. So we got some really good data to underpin the opinion, and that's super helpful as well. So thank you very much indeed, Zain. Charlotte, closing remarks, please.
Thanks, Nick. I just want to say a big thank you to all of our panellists. We couldn't have done it without you, nor could we have produced today's show without the questions from our audience that have been submitted in advance. We do have a full portfolio of cybersecurity training available on apmginternational.com, wherever you are in the world. So thank you.
All right, excellent. I want to give a shout out as well to all of the folks who have been joining us online. So thank you very much to the group who joined from Egypt today. From Akanor, thank you so much for joining from Nigeria. That was great to see you. We have people who were online who were joining us actually from just around the corner to one of our colleagues actually from Bangalore. And we also had a little bit of confusion phonically. APMG is a little bit different to KPMG. So there you go. All right. So anyway, look, thank you very much indeed, everybody. Benedicta as well, thank you so much for your contribution. On our website, everybody, you can search for and get answers to over 900 questions now, a comprehensive free resource that connects you with more than 130 experts from around the world. And don't forget that you can also listen to the audio versions of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. Next Monday, the 23rd, I'm going to be back and we'll be exploring how to develop an agile mindset. And then on Friday, Stefan Brendel, who leads our European team, will be in the chair helping you to think about how do you build a culture of relationship management across your organization. Subscribe to the show and we'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you too can join us here on the panel and, of course, level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time.